Judge Marissa Thompson is a district court judge in a medium-sized city. She has served in this position for over a decade, handling various cases that include civil, criminal, and family court matters. Known for her calm and objective demeanor, Judge Thompson has developed a reputation within the legal community as fair, methodical, and professional in her judicial proceedings. She maintains a structured and disciplined approach to her work and is known to have a thorough understanding of both procedural and substantive law, which has garnered respect from her colleagues, attorneys, and members of the community. As a judge, her role requires her to interpret the law and apply it impartially, ensuring justice is served within the legal framework of the jurisdiction she represents. Judge Thompson is described in public records and professional profiles as a Black woman in her mid-50s. She has attained her position through years of dedicated work, which included roles as a practicing attorney and then as a magistrate before she was appointed to the district court. Her experience spans nearly 3 decades in the legal field, with a focus on upholding the principles of justice, equality, and fairness. She often speaks at community events, local law schools, and legal seminars, where she provides insight into the importance of judicial ethics, impartiality, and the role of judges in maintaining societal trust in the legal system. Within her court, Judge Thompson is known for enforcing decorum and is regarded as a judge who values evidence-based arguments and legal precision. Officer Ryan Hayes is a police officer with the local police department in the same city where Judge Thompson serves. He has worked as a street patrol officer for approximately 15 years, performing duties typical for his role, such as responding to emergencies, conducting traffic stops, and handling incidents within the community. His experience includes dealing with various situations that arise in a city environment, from routine calls to more complex incidents requiring investigation and coordination with other law enforcement units. Officer Hayes has a record that reflects years of service, with consistent involvement in street patrol operations aimed at maintaining public safety and upholding the law. In his role, Officer Hayes is authorized to conduct stops, issue citations, and take enforcement actions as necessary under the city's police department policies. His role emphasizes adherence to standard procedures for stops, searches, and arrests, which are designed to ensure lawful interactions between law enforcement and the public. Officer Hayes is described as thorough in his duties, often performing checks and verifications during stops to confirm the identification and status of individuals he encounters. Over the years, he has undergone various training sessions mandated by the department, covering areas such as criminal procedure, conflict de-escalation, and community policing. The setting for this interaction is a mid-sized urban area with a diverse population. The city includes various neighborhoods, commercial zones, and legal institutions, such as the courthouse where Judge Thompson presides over cases. The local police department operates with a standard organizational structure, with patrol officers like Officer Hayes assigned to specific districts or sectors. In this city, traffic stops are common police procedures, conducted for a range of reasons including traffic violations, registration checks, and other lawful purposes related to public safety. The story begins as Judge Thompson is driving to the courthouse for a scheduled hearing. On this day, she is operating her vehicle within the city limits on a route she frequently takes. Judge Thompson follows her usual morning routine, preparing for the cases listed on her docket and anticipating a full day of judicial responsibilities. Her route to the courthouse is a familiar one, taking her through several intersections and areas known for moderate traffic, especially during rush hours. Officer Hayes, meanwhile, is conducting his routine patrol in a marked police vehicle. His patrol route covers the same area where Judge Thompson is traveling, and his duties include monitoring traffic for violations and observing any activities that might require police intervention. As a part of his regular patrol, Officer Hayes has discretion to initiate stops if he observes a violation or suspects any irregularities related to the operation of a vehicle. During this time, Officer Hayes observes a vehicle that he identifies as possibly committing a minor traffic infraction. Upon closer inspection, He decides to initiate a traffic stop based on this observation. He follows protocol by signaling for the driver to pull over, activating the patrol vehicle's lights, and waiting for the driver to comply. The vehicle pulls over to the side of the road as directed. Officer Hayes approaches the vehicle on foot, observing the driver as he nears. As he arrives at the driver's side window, he identifies the driver as Judge Marissa Thompson. While the setting of a routine traffic stop is typical for Officer Hayes, encountering a judge in this situation is an unusual event. He does not recognize Judge Thompson initially but observes that she has provided both her driver's license and an additional form of identification, which includes her judicial credentials. Judge Thompson hands over her identification as requested, following standard procedures for a traffic stop. This interaction introduces both the primary individuals in the story, Judge Marissa Thompson in her official capacity as a judge and Officer Ryan Hayes in his role as a law enforcement officer. Their encounter during this routine stop serves as the starting point for the sequence of events that follow, involving actions and responses strictly related to the situation at hand. Judge Marissa Thompson is en route to the courthouse, where she has several hearings scheduled for the day. The courthouse is a familiar destination, located in the city's administrative district, surrounded by government buildings, legal offices, and other public institutions. Judge Thompson, a district court judge, frequently drives to the courthouse, navigating the same route each day. This route takes her through a mixture of residential neighborhoods and commercial areas, leading to a main thoroughfare that runs directly to the courthouse. The traffic in this area is generally moderate, though it increases during rush hours as city residents commute to work, school, and other destinations. On this particular day, Judge Thompson follows her routine carefully, preparing herself mentally for the cases she will preside over. Her morning docket includes a range of legal matters, requiring her to be well prepared for each. She maintains a disciplined routine, having already reviewed case files and notes that morning, ensuring she is fully briefed on each case's legal nuances, procedural requirements, and relevant background. Her focus, as always, is on upholding the integrity of the judicial process, ensuring fair treatment and adherence to the rule of law in each case she handles. Judge Thompson's vehicle, a mid-sized sedan, is registered in her name and maintained in compliance with all applicable local regulations. She drives cautiously, following the posted speed limits and observing all necessary traffic signals and road signs. Given her position and professional responsibilities, Judge Thompson is mindful of adhering to the laws and regulations she oversees in her courtroom. Her driving reflects this awareness, as she understands the importance of setting an example, especially as a public figure in the legal system. Meanwhile, Officer Ryan Hayes is conducting his routine patrol in the same area. Officer Hayes is a long-serving patrol officer with the city's police department, responsible for monitoring traffic, responding to incidents, and maintaining public safety within his assigned district. His patrol vehicle is equipped with standard police technology, including a dashboard camera, radar system, and access to the department's communications network. These tools are standard equipment for officers on duty, allowing them to monitor traffic infractions and ensure compliance with city regulations. Officer Hayes has been on the force for over 15 years and is familiar with the procedures for conducting traffic stops, verifying identification, and issuing citations as necessary. On this particular patrol, Officer Hayes observes a steady flow of vehicles moving through his assigned area. As part of his routine, he monitors each vehicle for potential infractions, such as speeding, expired registration tags, or other issues that may warrant a stop. His role involves enforcing these minor infractions as a preventive measure to encourage safe driving and adherence to local traffic laws. The department has specific guidelines for traffic stops, outlining the standard procedures officers are to follow when identifying and addressing potential violations. Officer Hayes is trained to approach each stop with a standard protocol, identifying the reason for the stop, verifying the driver's information, and issuing the citation or warning if applicable. His role does not involve subjective judgment on the severity of the violation. Rather, it focuses on ensuring compliance with the law. He has undergone training in de-escalation and professional conduct, which are standard components of police training aimed at maintaining respectful and lawful interactions with the public. As Officer Hayes patrols, he notices Judge Thompson's vehicle among the other cars on the road. He observes her vehicle from a distance, noting its speed and position on the road. Officer Hayes identifies what appears to be a minor traffic infraction involving the vehicle's lane change signal. According to his observation, Judge Thompson's vehicle changes lanes without fully signaling, a violation that qualifies as a minor traffic infraction under the city's traffic regulations. Based on this observation, Officer Hayes decides to initiate a traffic stop to address the infraction. Following protocol, Officer Hayes activates his patrol vehicle's emergency lights, signaling to the driver to pull over. Judge Thompson, observing the patrol vehicle's lights, recognizes that she is being asked to stop and immediately complies by pulling her vehicle to the side of the road. She positions her vehicle safely on the shoulder, ensuring that her car is fully out of the traffic lane to allow other vehicles to pass unobstructed. She then turns off the engine and waits for the officer to approach, following the standard procedure for a traffic stop. Once her vehicle is stationary, Officer Hayes exits his patrol car and approaches Judge Thompson's vehicle on foot. He observes the driver through the window, noting that she appears calm and cooperative. As he reaches the driver's side window, he signals for her to lower the window to facilitate communication. Judge Thompson complies, rolling down her window and greeting Officer Hayes with a polite acknowledgement. Officer Hayes identifies himself and explains that he stopped her for failing to signal properly during a lane change, a minor infraction, but one that he is obligated to address as part of his patrol duties. Judge Thompson listens to Officer Hayes' explanation and nods in understanding. She reaches for her driver's license and registration, presenting them to Officer Hayes as requested. Along with these standard documents, she includes her official judicial identification card, which clearly displays her position as a district court judge. Judge Thompson's judicial ID is a standard credential issued by the state's judicial administration, intended for identification purposes in official matters and interactions with law enforcement. It includes her name, photo, and official title, verifying her status as a member of the judiciary. Officer Hayes takes the identification documents and briefly examines them. He acknowledges her judicial ID but proceeds to perform a standard verification process. This process includes running a background check on the driver's license and registration to confirm that both are valid and in compliance with city and state regulations. Officer Hayes returns to his patrol vehicle, where he enters Judge Thompson's information into the department's system. This process is routine, allowing the officer to verify that there are no outstanding issues, such as expired registration, unpaid citations, or other matters that would necessitate further action. As Officer Hayes conducts the check, Judge Thompson remains seated in her vehicle, waiting patiently. She understands that the officer is following standard procedures and does not question his actions, recognizing that he is performing his duty in accordance with department policies. While the situation is unexpected, Judge Thompson remains calm and cooperative, aware of the procedural nature of traffic stops and the responsibilities of both parties involved. After completing the background check, Officer Hayes finds no outstanding issues related to Judge Thompson's registration or driver's license. He notes that her records are up to date and free of any flags that would require further inquiry or escalation. With this information, Officer Hayes prepares to return her documents and inform her of the outcome of the stop. Officer Hayes then exits his patrol vehicle and approaches Judge Thompson's car once again. He returns her driver's license, registration, and judicial ID, acknowledging that the records are in order. He advises her of the minor infraction related to the lane change and informs her that, as this is a routine matter, he will issue a warning rather than a formal citation. This warning serves as a reminder to adhere to signaling requirements, consistent with the city's traffic regulations. Judge Thompson accepts the warning and expresses her understanding of the infraction. She thanks Officer Hayes for his time and prepares to continue on her way. The interaction concludes without further incident, with both parties having fulfilled their respective roles in the process. Judge Thompson resumes her drive to the courthouse, reflecting on the routine nature of the stop and the procedural approach taken by Officer Hayes. In this sequence of events, Judge Thompson's interaction with Officer Hayes represents a standard encounter between a motorist and a law enforcement officer, with each party following established procedures for a routine traffic stop. This situation serves as the foundation for the events that follow, highlighting the roles and responsibilities of both individuals within the framework of their respective duties. Officer Ryan Hayes, having initiated the traffic stop for a minor lane change infraction, exits his patrol car and walks toward the vehicle he has pulled over. The vehicle is safely positioned on the shoulder, with the driver already waiting with the window slightly down. As Officer Hayes approaches the driver's side, he observes the driver and assesses the situation based on visible details. His approach follows the standard procedures for a traffic stop, as he prepares to address the driver regarding the reason for the stop. Upon reaching the driver's side window, Officer Hayes introduces himself by name and states his position as an officer with the City Police Department. He explains to the driver, Judge Marissa Thompson, that he pulled her over due to a minor infraction involving her failure to signal before changing lanes. This explanation is delivered as part of his procedural duty to inform the driver of the reason for the stop. Officer Hayes' tone is formal, and he proceeds by requesting that Judge Thompson provide her driver's license and vehicle registration. Judge Thompson listens to Officer Hayes' explanation attentively. In response, she nods to acknowledge his statement regarding the infraction. Following protocol, Judge Thompson reaches into her bag to retrieve her driver's license and registration documents, which she then hands over to Officer Hayes, along with her license and registration. Judge Thompson also provides her official judicial identification card, which clearly identifies her as a district court judge. The judicial ID is a standard form of identification issued by the state's judicial branch, used by judges for official purposes and interactions with law enforcement. It includes her name, photograph, title, and official credentials. Officer Hayes examines the identification documents. He studies the judicial ID, looking at the name and title on the card, which clearly state Judge Marissa Thompson's position as a district court judge. Despite the clear identification, Officer Hayes does not immediately acknowledge her position. Instead, he holds the judicial ID and begins to make comments directed toward Judge Thompson. He asks if the ID is legitimate, questioning how she obtained it, and whether she truly holds a position within the judiciary. Officer Hayes' comments suggest skepticism about the authenticity of her credentials, as he questions the ID in a manner that implies doubt. Judge Thompson, observing Officer Hayes' reaction, calmly reaffirms her identity and position. She explains that the judicial ID is valid and that she has served as a district court judge in the city for over a decade. She reiterates her official capacity, stating that she regularly presents this identification for official purposes when required. Judge Thompson's response is measured, focusing on clarifying her credentials without expressing frustration. She provides these explanations factually, indicating that her judicial ID is part of the standard identification for members of the judiciary in the state. Despite Judge Thompson's straightforward response, Officer Hayes appears unconvinced. He continues to hold the judicial ID while making additional comments. He remarks on the make and model of Judge Thompson's vehicle, noting its appearance and suggesting it may not match his assumptions of what a judge would drive. His comments indirectly imply assumptions based on her race and appearance, questioning the connection between her position as a judge and her presence in the vehicle she is driving. Officer Hayes' statements reflect his perception of the situation, which appears influenced by factors beyond the minor traffic infraction initially observed. Judge Thompson, maintaining a calm demeanor, once again provides a factual response to Officer Hayes' statements. She confirms that the vehicle is registered in her name and explains that it is her personal car, used for commuting to and from the courthouse. She reaffirms that her judicial credentials are authentic and that her identification is valid. Judge Thompson's responses are direct and intended to clarify any doubts regarding her identity and the legitimacy of her credentials. However, Officer Hayes does not accept Judge Thompson's explanations at face value. Instead, he begins to escalate the interaction by asking additional questions unrelated to the traffic stop. He inquires about her career history, asking how long she has held her position and how she came to work as a judge in the city. These questions extend beyond the scope of a standard traffic stop, focusing on personal details rather than matters directly related to the traffic infraction or identification verification. Officer Hayes' questioning reflects an ongoing skepticism, despite the clear information Judge Thompson has provided regarding her identity and position. Judge Thompson answers Officer Hayes' questions factually, providing brief responses that align with her previous statements. She confirmed her years of service as a district court judge and notes her extensive experience in the legal field. Her answers are concise, addressing each question without elaborating beyond what is necessary. Judge Thompson's responses indicate her continued cooperation, as she remains willing to clarify her identity despite the unusual line of questioning. At this point, Officer Hayes shifts his attention back to the judicial ID, holding it up and scrutinizing it further. He reiterates his questions about the authenticity of the ID, expressing doubts in a manner that implies he does not find her explanation sufficient. Officer Hayes suggests that the ID could be a fabricated document, questioning whether Judge Thompson genuinely possesses the authority her credentials indicate. His comments imply a continued assumption based on her appearance, as he questions the validity of a document that clearly displays her official position as a judge. Judge Thompson, recognizing the escalation in Officer Hayes' questioning, calmly restates the validity of her identification. She points out that the judicial ID is issued by the state's judicial administration and is a standard credential for judges across the state. She reiterates that her position as a district court judge is a matter of public record, accessible through official channels. Judge Thompson's response remains factual, focusing on reinforcing the authenticity of her ID rather than responding to the tone of Officer Hayes' questioning. Despite Judge Thompson's repeated confirmations, Officer Hayes continues to question her. He shifts the conversation to her personal background, asking additional questions about her educational history and professional qualifications. These questions extend further beyond the scope of the traffic stop, delving into matters unrelated to the original reason for the stop or the verification of her identity. Officer Hayes' line of questioning reflects a continued escalation, as he presses for details that Judge Thompson has already addressed in her prior responses. Judge Thompson remains composed, providing brief responses to each of Officer Hayes' questions. She confirmed her educational background and professional experience, stating that her qualifications meet the requirements for her judicial position. Her responses are direct, aimed at addressing Officer Hayes' questions without elaborating unnecessarily. Judge Thompson's demeanor remains cooperative, as she answers each question factually in an attempt to resolve the situation. However, Officer Hayes persists in his questioning, asking for additional verification of Judge Thompson's judicial status. He suggests that she contact the courthouse or another official source to confirm her identity. This request is outside the standard protocol for a traffic stop, as it implies a level of doubt not typically associated with routine identification verification. Officer Hayes' request further escalates the situation, as it requires Judge Thompson to take additional steps to confirm her identity despite the presence of her official credentials. Judge Thompson, maintaining her calm demeanor, points out that her judicial ID and driver's license should be sufficient for verification. She notes that all information on her identification can be confirmed through official records, accessible to law enforcement if necessary. Judge Thompson's response is factual, emphasizing the sufficiency of her credentials within the framework of standard identification protocols. Nevertheless, Officer Hayes proceeds to request further information, indicating a continued escalation without a clear basis related to the original traffic infraction. He expresses doubts regarding Judge Thompson's responses, suggesting that her explanations do not fully satisfy his questions. This continued line of questioning diverges from standard traffic stop procedures, reflecting an ongoing focus on matters beyond the initial reason for the stop. Judge Thompson, observing the prolonged nature of the interaction, remains cooperative but does not offer additional explanations. She reiterates her previous responses, providing a clear and factual account of her identity and credentials. Her responses indicate a willingness to comply with standard procedures, though the scope of Officer Hayes' questioning has extended beyond typical protocol. The interaction concludes with Officer Hayes still expressing doubts regarding Judge Thompson's identification, despite her complete cooperation and provision of all required documents. Judge Thompson waits for Officer Hayes to finish his checks, aware that she has fulfilled her responsibility to provide valid identification and respond to his questions as required by law. This sequence of events presents the progression of Officer Hayes' interaction with Judge Thompson, focusing on the observable actions and statements exchanged between them. The escalation reflects Officer Hayes' continued questioning, despite Judge Thompson's consistent compliance and factual responses. Following his extended questioning of Judge Marissa Thompson, Officer Ryan Hayes decides to take additional steps in his verification process. Despite Judge Thompson's consistent compliance and her presentation of standard identification, including her driver's license and judicial ID, Officer Hayes calls for backup to assist with the stop. This decision represents an escalation in the interaction, as backup is typically requested in cases involving safety concerns, potential threats, or situations requiring additional law enforcement support. However, the current interaction between Officer Hayes and Judge Thompson has remained calm and cooperative, with no indicators of immediate risk or disturbance. After making the call, Officer Hayes informs Judge Thompson that he is waiting for additional units to arrive and that he will continue to verify her credentials in the meantime. He advises her to remain in the vehicle and assures her that this process should not take much longer. Judge Thompson acknowledges his instructions and complies without objection. She remains seated in her vehicle, maintaining a calm demeanor while awaiting further developments. She understands that Officer Hayes is now taking additional steps, despite her provision of all standard identification documents, and she prepares to wait as long as necessary for the interaction to conclude. Within a few minutes, 2 additional patrol cars arrive at the scene, responding to Officer Hayes' request for backup. Each backup officer exits their vehicle and approaches the primary scene where Officer Hayes is conducting the stop. The backup officers observe the situation from a short distance, positioning themselves near Officer Hayes to provide support as needed. Their posture and presence indicate readiness to assist, though they do not immediately intervene in the ongoing interaction between Officer Hayes and Judge Thompson. Instead, they wait for direction from Officer Hayes, who is managing the traffic stop as the primary responding officer. With backup officers present, Officer Hayes proceeds with what he describes as an additional verification of Judge Thompson's identification. He takes her driver's license and judicial ID back to his patrol vehicle, where he initiates a series of checks through the department's database system. These checks include a review of her driving record, vehicle registration status, and any associated records linked to her identification. The department system provides access to state and national databases, allowing officers to confirm the legitimacy of identification documents and cross-reference any relevant information. Judge Thompson remains seated in her vehicle during this process, observing the backup officers from a distance. She notices that they are maintaining a neutral stance, monitoring the situation, but not engaging directly. The presence of additional officers creates a heightened atmosphere around the stop. Though Judge Thompson's conduct remains unchanged, she continues to wait for Officer Hayes to complete his checks, understanding that his actions reflect a level of caution that extends beyond standard procedure for a minor infraction. Inside his patrol car, Officer Hayes conducts multiple checks, which confirm that Judge Thompson's driver's license, registration, and judicial ID are valid and in good standing. The system verifies her identity, matching her credentials with official records that indicate her status as a district court judge. These checks do not reveal any discrepancies, outstanding warrants, or issues with her vehicle registration. The results confirm that Judge Thompson's identification is legitimate, and there is no basis for further questioning related to the documents she has provided. Despite the confirmation of her identity, Officer Hayes continues to scrutinize the details available in the department system. He reviews Judge Thompson's driving history, which shows a record free of recent violations or citations. He also checks for any additional records associated with her name, finding no relevant information that would justify further action. The system reflects her professional standing and provides a straightforward account of her background, aligning with her explanations and the credentials she presented at the beginning of the stop. While Officer Hayes is completing these checks, the backup officers remain stationed nearby, observing the scene without participating. Their presence reinforces the escalation initiated by Officer Hayes, though they do not engage in any direct actions beyond maintaining a supportive stance. The backup officers appear aware that the situation involves a standard traffic stop, and they wait for further instructions from Officer Hayes, prepared to assist if necessary. Their role remains passive, allowing Officer Hayes to control the interaction and determine the next steps. After concluding his review of Judge Thompson's records, Officer Hayes exits his patrol vehicle and returns to Judge Thompson's car. He holds her driver's license, registration, and judicial ID, preparing to return these documents as the interaction nears its conclusion. Approaching the driver's side window, Officer Hayes provides a summary of his findings, stating that her records are in order and that there are no issues with her identification or vehicle registration. His tone is formal, acknowledging that the checks have confirmed her identity without noting the extended nature of the verification process. Officer Hayes proceeds to issue a verbal warning to Judge Thompson regarding the minor infraction that initially prompted the stop. He informed her that the warning serves as a reminder to signal before changing lanes, consistent with the city's traffic regulations. Officer Hayes states that no citation will be issued, and the warning does not carry any formal penalty. The purpose of the warning, as explained, is to ensure compliance with traffic laws, emphasizing the importance of signaling for lane changes as a preventive measure for road safety. Judge Thompson listens attentively to Officer Hayes' explanation and acknowledges his summary of the stop. She expresses her understanding of the infraction and thanks Officer Hayes for providing the warning. Her response is professional and polite, reflecting her awareness of the procedural aspects of the interaction. Judge Thompson accepts the warning without further comment, indicating her readiness to conclude the stop and continue with her day. Officer Hayes returns Judge Thompson's identification documents, handing them back to her through the window. He confirms that she is free to proceed and steps back from the vehicle, signaling that the interaction has officially ended. The backup officers, observing that the stop has concluded, return to their patrol cars without further engagement. They depart from the scene shortly after, resuming their respective duties elsewhere in the city. Judge Thompson starts her vehicle and prepares to leave, now free to continue her route to the courthouse for her scheduled hearings. The stop concludes without additional incident, with both Officer Hayes and the backup officers returning to their standard patrol duties. The scene returns to its usual state as traffic resumes its normal flow along the road. This sequence of events highlights the procedural escalation undertaken by Officer Hayes during the stop. His decision to request backup and perform extended checks reflects an approach that goes beyond standard protocol for a minor traffic infraction, particularly given Judge Thompson's cooperation and presentation of valid identification. The arrival of backup officers reinforces the escalated nature of the stop, though their role remains observational, with no direct intervention in the interaction. After completing his checks and finding no issues, Officer Hayes' issuance of a warning reflects the outcome of a standard traffic stop despite the additional steps he undertook during the verification process. Judge Thompson's calm and cooperative demeanor throughout the interaction exemplifies her adherence to the procedural expectations of the stop, allowing the interaction to conclude without conflict. The final outcome, a verbal warning and return of her documents, marks the resolution of the stop, allowing both parties to proceed with their respective responsibilities. This section presents the key actions and developments of the stop in a sequential manner, focusing on Officer Hayes' procedural decisions, the passive role of the backup officers, and Judge Thompson's cooperative response. The interaction concludes with a return to standard protocol, as Officer Hayes closes the stop and allows Judge Thompson to continue on her way. Later that day, after concluding her scheduled hearings at the courthouse, Judge Marissa Thompson decides to take formal action regarding the traffic stop incident with Officer Ryan Hayes. In her official capacity as a district court judge, Judge Thompson holds a position of influence within the city's legal and administrative networks, providing her with a clear avenue to address grievances or irregularities encountered in interactions with public officials, including law enforcement officers. Understanding the importance of maintaining accountability in public service, Judge Thompson approaches the situation with a structured and procedural response. She chooses to report the incident to the Police Department's Oversight Committee, a body responsible for reviewing complaints, investigating potential misconduct, and ensuring that officers adhere to departmental policies and public service standards. Judge Thompson begins by drafting a detailed account of the incident, outlining each stage of the interaction with Officer Hayes. Her report includes the initial reason for the stop, the nature of Officer Hayes' questioning, and the escalation that involved calling for backup officers, despite her full cooperation and clear presentation of identification, including her judicial ID. Judge Thompson's account is factual, focusing on observable actions and statements rather than interpreting Officer Hayes' motivations or inferring intent. By documenting the sequence of events in this manner, she aims to provide the Oversight Committee with a comprehensive overview of the incident based on direct observations and specific interactions. In her report, Judge Thompson emphasizes the points where she felt the interaction deviated from standard protocol. She notes that while the initial stop was explained as being related to a minor traffic infraction, failing to signal during a lane change, the stop quickly escalated beyond what is typically expected for such a minor issue. Judge Thompson highlights that, despite presenting her valid driver's license and judicial ID, Officer Hayes questioned the legitimacy of her identification, asking multiple times if she was truly a judge and expressing doubts about her credentials. Her report includes the specific questions Officer Hayes asked about her career background, professional qualifications, and the authenticity of her judicial ID, all of which extended beyond the scope of the initial traffic stop. Judge Thompson includes a section in her report that describes the nature of Officer Hayes' comments about her appearance and vehicle. She notes that his remarks suggested assumptions based on her race, indirectly questioning her position as a judge. While Officer Hayes did not make direct statements regarding her race, Judge Thompson perceives that his comments implied a lack of belief in her authority or position, influenced by factors unrelated to the traffic infraction. She explains that these implications were evident in the way he questioned her identity, despite the presence of a valid judicial ID and her clear compliance with his requests. Judge Thompson's report to the Oversight Committee also addresses the decision by Officer Hayes to call for backup. She notes that she remained calm and cooperative throughout the interaction, providing all necessary documentation without resistance. Given her understanding of law enforcement protocols, she recognizes that calling for backup is typically reserved for situations involving potential threats, safety risks, or individuals who refuse to comply. In this case, Judge Thompson emphasizes that her conduct did not present any of these factors, raising questions about the necessity of escalating the stop by involving additional officers. Her report suggests that the decision to call for backup may have been influenced by assumptions Officer Hayes made about her based on her race and appearance, rather than any objective factors related to the stop. To support her account, Judge Thompson includes references to standard police procedures for minor traffic stops and identification verification. She cites examples of typical interactions involving minor infractions, noting that such stops usually conclude with a warning or citation once the driver's license and registration have been verified. By highlighting these procedural norms, Judge Thompson underscores the deviation in her case, where additional steps were taken despite her cooperation and the absence of any irregularities in her identification. After completing her written report, Judge Thompson submits it to the Oversight Committee through formal channels. The Oversight Committee operates independently from the police department, with members selected to review complaints, assess potential policy violations, and recommend actions as necessary. The committee includes a mix of civilian representatives and individuals with backgrounds in law enforcement, legal practice, and public administration, ensuring a balanced perspective in evaluating incidents involving police conduct. Judge Thompson's submission includes a request for the committee to review body camera footage from the stop, which would provide a direct record of the interaction and verify the sequence of events she described. Upon receiving Judge Thompson's report, the Oversight Committee initiates a preliminary review process. This process includes gathering relevant documentation, requesting statements from the officers involved, and obtaining video evidence from body cameras and dashboard cameras, if available. The committee schedules an initial review session to assess the details of the complaint and determine if further investigation is warranted. Given Judge Thompson's position and the detailed nature of her report, the committee prioritizes the case for review, recognizing the potential implications of the incident for both police conduct and community relations. In the following days, the Oversight Committee begins a formal investigation into the incident. The committee reviews the body camera footage from Officer Hayes, observing the interaction from his perspective and verifying the events as described in Judge Thompson's report. The footage corroborates her account, showing Officer Hayes questioning her identification and expressing doubt about her judicial status despite the presence of valid credentials. The video also captures his comments about her appearance and vehicle, which the committee notes as potentially indicative of bias or preconceived assumptions. As part of the investigation, the Oversight Committee interviews Officer Hayes to obtain his account of the incident. During the interview, Officer Hayes explains his rationale for the stop, stating that he initially observed a traffic infraction involving a lane change without signaling. He acknowledges that he questioned Judge Thompson's judicial ID, citing concerns about the authenticity of the document. When asked about his decision to call for backup, Officer Hayes states that he felt it was a precautionary measure, though he does not provide specific reasons related to safety or noncompliance. The Oversight Committee also interviews the backup officers who arrived at the scene, asking them to describe their observations and role in the interaction. The backup officers confirm that they observed the interaction from a distance without engaging directly. They note that Judge Thompson appeared calm and cooperative, and they did not perceive any immediate risk or threat that would necessitate their intervention. Their statements align with Judge Thompson's account, reinforcing the perception that the escalation was not warranted based on her conduct. After completing the investigation, the Oversight Committee convenes to review the findings and determine appropriate actions. The committee concludes that the escalation of the stop, particularly the decision to call for backup and the prolonged questioning of Judge Thompson's identity, did not align with standard procedures for a minor traffic infraction. The committee's report highlights concerns regarding Officer Hayes' conduct, noting that his actions suggested potential bias based on Judge Thompson's race and appearance. The report states that while Officer Hayes did not make overtly discriminatory statements, his questioning and decision to escalate the stop reflected assumptions that were not based on objective factors. As a result of the investigation, the Oversight Committee recommends disciplinary action for Officer Hayes. The committee's recommendations include a formal reprimand for failing to adhere to procedural standards and an order for Officer Hayes to complete additional training in racial sensitivity and bias awareness. The committee also advises the police department to review its protocols for traffic stops and backup requests. emphasizing the importance of adhering to procedural guidelines and ensuring that escalation measures are reserved for situations where they are truly warranted. Following the Oversight Committee's recommendations, the police department issues a formal reprimand to Officer Hayes, documenting the incident in his personnel file. The reprimand specifies that Officer Hayes' conduct during the stop did not meet the department's standards for professional conduct and procedural adherence. Additionally, Officer Hayes is required to attend training sessions focused on recognizing and mitigating implicit bias, with the goal of improving his approach to interactions with diverse community members. This training is part of a broader initiative by the department to enhance community relations and ensure equitable treatment in all interactions. In addition to the disciplinary action for Officer Hayes, the police department reviews its policies related to traffic stops and backup requests. The department issues a memo to all officers, reminding them of the importance of following protocol and using discretion when deciding to escalate stops. The memo emphasizes that backup should only be requested when there is a clear and justifiable reason, such as safety concerns or noncompliance from the individual involved. By reinforcing these guidelines, the department aims to prevent unnecessary escalations and maintain public trust in law enforcement practices. Judge Thompson receives formal acknowledgement from the Oversight Committee, confirming that her report prompted a thorough investigation and resulted in disciplinary actions. The committee expresses appreciation for her cooperation in providing a factual account of the incident and contributing to the review process. Judge Thompson's report serves as a documented example of accountability, reinforcing the importance of maintaining professionalism and respect in all interactions between law enforcement officers and members of the public. This section covers the revelation of the incident, the investigation conducted by the Oversight Committee, and the resulting consequences for Officer Hayes. Through her report, Judge Thompson highlights procedural deviations and addresses the need for accountability, resulting in policy reviews and corrective actions within the police department. The sequence of events reflects a structured and factual approach to addressing concerns, ensuring that the matter is resolved through established oversight mechanisms. After receiving Judge Marissa Thompson's formal complaint and reviewing her account of the traffic stop incident, the Oversight Committee initiates a comprehensive review process to determine if Officer Ryan Hayes' actions aligned with departmental policies and standards of conduct. The Oversight Committee, composed of members with backgrounds in law enforcement, legal practice, and civilian oversight, is responsible for ensuring accountability within the police department and addressing complaints of misconduct. In this case, the committee prioritizes the review, recognizing that the incident involves potential procedural violations and concerns about implicit bias in Officer Hayes' conduct. The committee's investigation begins with an examination of the body camera footage from Officer Hayes, which captures the entire interaction between him and Judge Thompson. The footage provides a detailed, objective record of the events as they unfolded, allowing the committee to assess whether Officer Hayes' actions adhered to established protocols for traffic stops. The committee members watch the footage closely, analyzing each aspect of the interaction, including Officer Hayes' questioning, his decision to call for backup, and the nature of his comments to Judge Thompson. Upon reviewing the footage, the Oversight Committee identifies multiple points where Officer Hayes' actions deviate from departmental guidelines. According to police protocol, officers are expected to maintain a professional and respectful demeanor during interactions with the public, especially in routine traffic stops involving minor infractions. Officers are trained to verify identification and registration swiftly and proceed with issuing warnings or citations as appropriate to the situation. The committee observes that despite Judge Thompson's cooperation and presentation of her judicial ID, Officer Hayes continued to question her credentials and identity, casting doubt on her position without clear justification. The committee notes that Officer Hayes' comments regarding Judge Thompson's appearance and vehicle imply assumptions that were not relevant to the traffic stop. In their review, The committee highlights instances where Officer Hayes questions the validity of her judicial ID and makes remarks that suggest skepticism based on her race and appearance. The committee concludes that these comments reflect implicit bias, as they reveal an assumption that Judge Thompson's appearance did not align with his expectations of a judicial official. The committee also reviews Officer Hayes' decision to call for backup. Departmental protocols specify that backup requests are appropriate in situations where there is a perceived threat, risk of noncompliance, or potential for escalation. However, the footage and statements from the backup officers indicate that Judge Thompson remained calm, cooperative, and compliant throughout the interaction. Her conduct did not present any observable risks or threats that would warrant additional officers on the scene. The committee determines that Officer Hayes' decision to escalate the situation by calling for backup was unwarranted, as it added a level of formality and implied risk that was not present in the interaction. After completing their review of the body camera footage and additional documentation, including statements from the backup officers and Officer Hayes' personnel file, the Oversight Committee schedules a formal review session to address the findings. Officer Hayes is summoned to this review, where he is presented with the committee's conclusions regarding his conduct during the traffic stop. The session is structured to provide Officer Hayes with an opportunity to explain his actions, while also ensuring that the committee's observations and concerns are clearly communicated. During the formal review session, Officer Hayes is asked to explain the rationale behind his decision to question Judge Thompson's credentials and call for backup. He acknowledges that he initiated the stop based on a minor traffic infraction, but states that he had concerns about the authenticity of her judicial ID. Officer Hayes argues that his skepticism was intended as a precaution, citing the importance of verifying identification thoroughly. However, when questioned about his comments regarding Judge Thompson's appearance and vehicle, Officer Hayes is unable to provide a justification that aligns with departmental standards for professionalism and respect. The Oversight Committee presents Officer Hayes with specific excerpts from the body camera footage, highlighting moments where his comments imply assumptions based on Judge Thompson's race and position. The committee explains that such assumptions are not appropriate within the context of a professional interaction, and that officers are expected to rely on factual information rather than personal perceptions or biases. The committee further explains that the decision to call for backup, despite Judge Thompson's calm and cooperative behavior, was inconsistent with protocols for minor traffic stops, especially given the absence of any observable risks or noncompliance. Following this review, the Oversight Committee delivers a formal reprimand to Officer Hayes. The reprimand is documented in his personnel file, noting that his conduct during the interaction did not meet the department's standards for professional behavior and adherence to protocol. The reprimand outlines the specific actions that violated protocol, including the prolonged questioning of Judge Thompson's identity, the decision to call for backup, and the comments reflecting implicit bias. The reprimand emphasizes that Officer Hayes' actions were inconsistent with the department's commitment to unbiased policing and respectful treatment of all individuals, regardless of their race or position. In addition to the reprimand, the Oversight Committee mandates that Officer Hayes complete additional training focused on racial sensitivity, implicit bias, and professional conduct. This training is designed to address the underlying issues identified in the review and to provide Officer Hayes with tools to improve his approach in future interactions. The racial sensitivity training component covers topics such as recognizing and mitigating implicit bias, understanding the impact of assumptions based on race or appearance, and promoting equitable treatment across diverse community groups. The professionalism training reinforces the importance of maintaining a respectful and objective demeanor, even in situations that may present challenges or involve unfamiliar individuals. The committee also recommends that Officer Hayes' supervisors monitor his performance more closely for a period following the training, to ensure that he applies the principles covered in the sessions. This monitoring period includes regular check-ins and evaluations, where supervisors observe Officer Hayes' interactions with the public and provide feedback on areas of improvement. The goal of this oversight is to promote accountability and encourage positive behavioral changes that align with the department's standards and community expectations. The Police Department's administration, following the Oversight Committee's recommendations, implements additional measures to reinforce protocol adherence and accountability across the department. These measures include updating internal guidelines for traffic stops and backup requests, emphasizing that officers must assess the necessity of escalation based on objective criteria rather than subjective impressions. The updated guidelines are disseminated to all officers through a departmental memo, which reminds them of the importance of adhering to established protocols and reinforces the expectation of professionalism and impartiality in all public interactions. The department also arranges for periodic training sessions for all officers, focused on cultural competence, implicit bias awareness, and procedural justice. These sessions are intended to promote a deeper understanding of the diverse communities served by the police department and to equip officers with skills to engage effectively and respectfully. By institutionalizing these training sessions, the department aims to foster a culture of inclusivity and fairness, reducing the likelihood of future incidents involving biased assumptions or unnecessary escalation. As a result of these actions, Officer Hayes is formally reprimanded, and his personnel file reflects the incident as a documented case of procedural deviation. The additional training requirements and monitoring period serve as corrective measures to address the specific issues identified in his conduct. The department's broader policy adjustments and training initiatives reflect a commitment to improving community relations and ensuring that all interactions with the public are guided by principles of respect, fairness, and impartiality. Judge Thompson is informed of the outcome of her report, receiving a letter from the Oversight Committee that outlines the investigation's findings and the actions taken in response to her complaint. The letter expresses appreciation for her cooperation in providing a factual account of the incident, which facilitated a thorough review and informed the committee's recommendations. Judge Thompson's report serves as a valuable input in the oversight process, reinforcing the importance of accountability in interactions between law enforcement and the judiciary. The resolution of this case underscores the Oversight Committee's role in upholding standards within the police department and addressing instances of conduct that do not align with community expectations. By implementing disciplinary measures, additional training, and policy adjustments, the department takes steps to prevent similar incidents in the future and to promote a culture of accountability and respect. The consequences for Officer Hayes are intended to serve as a corrective response, while the broader departmental actions demonstrate a commitment to continual improvement and community trust. In the following months, the department monitors the impact of the new guidelines and training sessions, gathering feedback from officers and community members to assess the effectiveness of these initiatives. The feedback indicates a gradual improvement in interactions between officers and the public, with increased awareness of the importance of procedural fairness and equitable treatment. The department's focus on accountability and professionalism contributes to strengthening community relations as officers apply the principles of respect and impartiality in their day-to-day duties. This resolution section provides a detailed account of the formal actions taken by the Oversight Committee and the Police Department. Officer Hayes' reprimand, mandated training, and supervisory oversight represent targeted responses to his conduct, while the department's broader policy changes reflect an organizational commitment to fairness and accountability. Through these actions, the police department reinforces its dedication to maintaining public trust and ensuring that all individuals are treated with respect and dignity in law enforcement interactions. In the aftermath of the incident involving Judge Marissa Thompson and Officer Ryan Hayes, the police department undertakes a comprehensive review of its training procedures, policies, and community engagement initiatives. Recognizing the importance of preventing similar issues in the future, the department implements a series of updates designed to improve officers' understanding of respectful conduct, procedural adherence, and effective communication with diverse community members. These changes are aimed at fostering a culture of professionalism and inclusivity, aligning with both departmental standards and public expectations. One of the primary updates focuses on enhancing the department's training curriculum. A new series of training modules is introduced, emphasizing respectful interactions, cultural competence, implicit bias awareness, and procedural justice. These modules are mandatory for all officers, regardless of rank or years of service. The updated training program is structured to provide officers with practical skills and strategies for conducting themselves in a professional and unbiased manner across various scenarios, particularly those involving routine interactions like traffic stops. The cultural competence component of the training addresses the importance of understanding and respecting the diversity within the community. Officers learn about the impact of assumptions based on race, appearance, and socioeconomic factors, and are encouraged to approach each interaction objectively. This segment of the training is designed to cultivate an awareness of the diverse backgrounds and experiences that shape individuals' perspectives and interactions with law enforcement. By focusing on cultural competence, the department aims to ensure that officers recognize and mitigate the influence of implicit biases in their decisions and actions. Implicit bias training forms another essential part of the updated curriculum. Officers are introduced to the concept of implicit bias and its potential effects on their interactions with the public. Through workshops and case studies, officers examine scenarios in which implicit bias may arise, learning to identify and manage these biases to avoid unfair treatment or unnecessary escalation. This training component reinforces the need for officers to rely on factual information and established procedures, rather than subjective impressions or assumptions. By addressing implicit bias, the department strives to create an environment where all community members feel respected and are treated equitably. The procedural justice component emphasizes the importance of transparency, accountability, and fairness in law enforcement practices. Officers are trained to adhere to clear protocols, especially in routine interactions such as traffic stops, identification checks, and public inquiries. Procedural justice training reinforces the expectation that officers conduct themselves with integrity, following protocols to ensure that interactions remain professional and focused on the relevant legal or procedural matters. The department's commitment to procedural justice reflects a broader effort to promote trust and confidence in law enforcement, as officers consistently apply fair and objective standards. To implement these training updates effectively, the police department partners with external experts and community organizations. Specialists in cultural competence and implicit bias lead training sessions, providing officers with insights and tools for building respectful and inclusive relationships within the community. Community organizations and advocacy groups are also involved in shaping the training curriculum, offering perspectives on the experiences and challenges faced by different community groups in their interactions with law enforcement. This collaborative approach ensures that the training is both comprehensive and reflective of community needs and expectations. In addition to updating its training procedures, the department revises its policies regarding traffic stops, backup requests, and escalation protocols. These revised policies emphasize the importance of assessing each situation based on objective criteria, ensuring that officers only call for backup or escalate interactions when there is a clear and justifiable reason. The updated guidelines are communicated to all officers through departmental memos and briefings, outlining specific criteria for determining when additional support is necessary. By reinforcing these guidelines, the department aims to prevent unnecessary escalation and promote a consistent, fair approach to handling routine interactions. As part of the revised policies, officers are reminded of the importance of clear communication during interactions with the public. Officers are trained to explain the reasons for their actions in straightforward terms, helping individuals understand the purpose of a stop or inquiry. This emphasis on communication is intended to reduce confusion and foster a sense of transparency, particularly in situations where individuals may feel uncertain or apprehensive. The department encourages officers to maintain a calm and respectful tone, regardless of the circumstances, as a means of reinforcing professionalism and de-escalating potential tensions. To monitor the effectiveness of these updates, the police department implements a system of regular evaluations and feedback. Officers are assessed on their adherence to the revised protocols and training principles, with supervisors conducting periodic performance reviews that include observations of officers' interactions with the public. These evaluations consider factors such as professionalism, adherence to protocol, and respect for cultural differences. By gathering feedback from both supervisors and community members, the department is able to track the impact of its initiatives and make further adjustments as needed. The Oversight Committee, which played a central role in reviewing Judge Thompson's complaint, continues its work in ensuring accountability within the police department. Following the incident, the committee establishes a protocol for handling complaints involving potential bias or procedural deviations. Under this protocol, complaints are prioritized for swift review, with the committee responsible for conducting thorough investigations and recommending disciplinary actions or policy changes as warranted. This strengthened oversight process helps to reinforce public confidence, as community members are assured that their concerns will be addressed promptly and transparently. Judge Thompson resumes her role on the bench, where she continues to preside over a range of cases with the same commitment to fairness and impartiality that defines her judicial career. Although the incident with Officer Hayes was unexpected, Judge Thompson's decision to report the matter to the Oversight Committee reflects her dedication to accountability and integrity within the justice system. Her experience serves as a reminder of the importance of procedural fairness and respectful conduct, values that she consistently upholds in her courtroom and advocates for within the broader legal community. Officer Hayes, following the reprimand and mandated training, remains in his role with the police department, subject to additional oversight. He completes the racial sensitivity and professionalism training as required, and his performance is closely monitored by his supervisors. Over the subsequent months, Officer Hayes receives feedback on his conduct, with supervisors assessing his interactions to ensure alignment with departmental standards. The oversight serves as a corrective measure, providing him with guidance and accountability as he adapts to the department's updated expectations. The police department's efforts to improve training and policy adherence lead to gradual but observable improvements in community relations. Feedback from community members indicates a greater sense of respect and understanding in their interactions with law enforcement, as officers apply the principles covered in their training. Community forums and public meetings provide venues for open dialogue between officers and residents, fostering a spirit of collaboration and mutual respect. These forums allow residents to share their perspectives on policing and offer input on additional measures the department can take to build trust. Over time, the department's focus on professionalism and respect yields positive outcomes, as officers report feeling more prepared to handle diverse situations with sensitivity and objectivity. The training initiatives encourage officers to view their interactions as opportunities to serve the public, reinforcing the values of accountability, fairness, and integrity. The department's commitment to continual improvement is evident in its willingness to adjust policies and procedures in response to feedback, demonstrating a proactive approach to maintaining public trust. The long-term impact of these changes is reflected in a reduction in complaints related to officer conduct, particularly those involving perceptions of bias or disrespect. The Oversight Committee continues to monitor complaint trends and shares periodic reports with the public, providing transparency regarding the department's performance. By maintaining open communication with the community and demonstrating responsiveness to concerns, the department establishes a foundation of trust that supports effective law enforcement and positive community engagement. As a result of the incident and the subsequent reforms, the police department is better equipped to meet the needs of a diverse community. The emphasis on respectful conduct, cultural competence, and adherence to protocol contributes to a policing approach that aligns with the values of fairness and justice. Officers are encouraged to view themselves as partners with the community, working together to ensure safety and uphold the rights of all individuals. In conclusion, the incident involving Judge Thompson and Officer Hayes serves as a catalyst for meaningful change within the police department. The department's updated training procedures, revised policies, and commitment to accountability reflect an organizational dedication to fostering a professional and respectful environment. Judge Thompson's decision to report the incident highlights the importance of oversight and accountability, while Officer Hayes's corrective measures demonstrate the potential for personal growth and adaptation. Through these collective efforts, the police department enhances its service to the community, promoting a culture of respect, integrity, and inclusivity that supports positive relationships between law enforcement and the public.